I'm joined with Matt Estock, and we're talking about Kingdom Bash today. So thank you for joining us, Matt.
Hello, hello. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm good. So to get this interview rolling, why don't you give us a pitch in your own words of Kingdom Bash? What is it, and why should people be excited?
Oh man, all right. It's been hard to explain the game, but so Kingdom Bash is a local multiplayer twin stick kind of a game, fantasy action. Um, I developed this game as a love letter to classic games with the intention of bringing back couch multiplayer. I've wanted to throw parties and have my friends lose at a game that I could beat them in, I guess. um, and that happens often. So I wanted to make a game that's easy to learn, hard to master. There's a lot of meta to it, and yeah, it's really hard to describe.
No, I think that does a good job of kind of getting people in the right mindset. One of the things that is cool that I want to make sure I mention about Kingdom Bash is that it's not just a versus kind of arena brawler. There's co-op and there's a solo version. Um,
Yes.
so that all plays into one of the coolest parts of the game that I thought when I first played it at Play NYC this past summer, which is there's kind of a like an NPC or an environmental aspect to the game where there's traps and there's these very specific weapons that you can use at certain points, and there's monsters that get spawned over time. This seems like a lot of different parts to be juggling.
Yeah.
So how have you approached kind of balancing all these different parts in these different game modes?
Okay. So well, with the development, I'm recording all of my stats. I'm a full-time web developer actually. So I figured out a way to send stats up to a server. So I'm collecting all this data in the game as you're playing it. Every slash, every arrow fired, every catch that you do, every monster slain, all counts of rounds, how long a round goes, lots and lots of stats.
Mm.
So with I wanted to make a game that's strong with its system. So it's systemic in the way that all of the components can just work, and it's all driven by whatever mode I throw at the player, I suppose. So yeah.
No, I think that yeah, that makes sense. I maybe should have led with this question, but you mentioned that this is a love letter to other games.
Yes.
So obviously nostalgia is a big part of this.
Yeah.
But you also, I assume, want to build something that's very clearly something different, something your own.
Right.
Um, how do you do that? How do you take something that is so nostalgic and put your own spin on it? Or how have you
Right.
approached that? Let's say.
Right. So originally this game originally was going to be strict by the book, going to be like an NES title.
Hmm.
Um, I I am currently making music using FamiTracker, which is authentic to the NES chipset. And that's actually how the guys at Shovel Knight made their music. Fun facts. And I wanted to keep with the palette that was true to the NES and sounds that have that whole thing just built in to be just NES authentic. Where that falls down is you can make really boring games with just the NES limitations. Originally the game started out as a sort of a MOBA, believe it or not. And then it quickly changed after I figured out that I love Towerfall
Mm-hmm.
a lot. So now, as far as inspiration, Legend of Zelda is a huge one. Link to the Past is a favorite of mine. NES in general, and something like Shovel Knight is a huge example of what NES can be done right in the modern sense.
Mm.
And then of course, like I played Towerfall. I played like I'm a big shooter fan, so like
Mm.
I'm a Battlefield fan, all that stuff. Not necessarily an influence necessarily, but maybe aesthetically or like gameplay flow. Like I have an understanding at least in practice of how games should feel and get the flow going with
Mm.
that stuff. Um, Lots of influences. So
Yeah.
um, I just I'm just bringing everything that I have to the table, which is, a lot, I
Yeah.
guess.
And that's kind of a good segue into the other thing I want to talk about. So you're a solo dev. You're
Yeah.
the sole guy working on this project. Um, how have you approached that? Because especially recently, I've seen a lot of developers talking about that on Twitter and in the Indiedev scenes about the challenges of doing this alone. Um, what has your experience been like with that, and how do you approach trying to balance that?
Well, so I'm a full-time web developer. I'm actually spoiler at my job's office. My boss knows. He's a great guy. Great guy. He knows. He appreciates it. And that was part of. I think that was the first step. Was like me asking permission to even pursue this. So I mean, web development, game design, totally different things, and that's great. So he was like, "Go for it. I won't touch it as long as it's not between 9 and 5." So I'm like, "You got it, dude." And as far as like approaching it, I've one of your other questions that I know you're going to ask is where and how I got started with it all. So it really started. I'm using GameMaker Studio, and it was originally GameMaker. I was making games and stuff with GameMaker back in high school. Like it was version 4.1, I think was the first version I installed on my computer, my like Windows 98. And it was a blast. And I made 2 games that like the internet, if you scour it, you might find it. Not games, but like just like little tech demos, I would even call them. One was Custom Skies, and it was like a top-down jet fighter game that had like customization and stuff in it. And then another one was Custom Spies, because I'm not really clever with naming, and it was a 2.5D RPG shooter. It was like what Borderlands is, but like much not good. It was really just like a not good version of Borderlands, and not funny. It was bad. It was bad. But so I started there, designing all of these things in my notebook while ignoring my calculus teacher. And then I kind of stopped after high school. I got into web development. Good thing it's a paying job. Thanks, Frank, for letting me be in this room. And then I came back to it after like hearing like, oh, GameMaker Studio has been getting big and stuff, and like, oh, now I have a paycheck. I'm an adult, and air quotes seriously. And I kept seeing all these games coming out from GameMaker, like Spelunky, Gunpoint, Hotline Miami.
Yeah.
Hyperlight Drifter just came out. There's another one, Crashlands, that I think came out pretty recently. All these games, like the listeners should have probably already heard of them if they haven't. Checked it out. They're all great GameMaker games.
Yeah.
And they all came from the same platform. And what I've noticed is though there's a stigma of GameMaker being just bad, and in some cases it is a challenge to use it. The tool can be used to do great things, and those games are proof of it. There's plenty of like children making games that are like, the graphic assets don't match and the sound is horrible, and there's plenty of garbage, but you can say the same of Unity and Unreal and so many other engines. It's like, what's your point? It doesn't do 3D, but it does 2D exactly the way I want it to, for the most part. And so here I am, probably 2 years later after reinstalling and downloading Game Maker Studio, and yeah, two and a half years now.
That's a really great overview of kind of your journey. So you kind of answered the question I was going to ask. So let's talk about kind of some more specifics about inspiration. And let's talk about the stuff that isn't obvious. So like you mentioned like Zelda and these classic old NES games that you can very clearly see if you look at any Kingdom Bash footage. But what are some inspirations that people might not expect?
Well, okay, so Legend of Zelda, like, pick a game in the series, the original Link to the Past with the art style. Is certainly there. I've gotten Bomberman before, which makes sense, and it being grid based, I've actually considered making some more Bomberman like things in the game.
Cool.
So look out for that, perhaps. I've gotten Castle Crashers before, which is interesting. Not quite a brawler per se, but you are fighting the environment, but you're also fighting, you're also fighting each other. So
right.
There's that. Other influences, a lot of the stages and like environments that right now are just like Forest 1, Forest 2, Ice 1, Sand 3, like all these stages I'm just numbering, and that has actually gotten its own like following. A couple of the friends that I have are like, yo, bring up Ice 3, and I'm like, no, dude, it's a hard stage. There's like flail, there's like a spiked flail and ice, like you don't want to play on that stage right now. No, but so like I do plan on having a like lore light, if you will, which is going to pull from I'm going to write like kind of like the story. There's going to be a gist to it, and I think that's kind of in the light of NES style story.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's some games have words, but I'm gonna try to use as few as possible and let it be the player's action that moves it, and have it be a story about you doing it rather than these characters. I hope maybe I'm just talking. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out still.
Well, it's part of the process. That's
part of the process. Here, we're live developing my game right now. So, yeah, I like, for instance, Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight has like its story there, and I want the characters to be loved. So the characters will have their story of sorts. But for instance, like, okay, so Castle Crashers. There's no text, but like they have emotion that they show in these tiny little sprites, and I wanna convey emotion and character development through that as well. So there's some technical, like, little subtle things that I need to continue to work on to make that feeling happen. Other games include I'm a big fan of Soul Calibur. Specifically, where players will soon see influence from Soul Calibur 2 and 3, because the single player modes, the story modes, have players moving across stages and playing all of these like situational battles and stuff. You're gonna see that in the quest mode, and that's where I'm gonna stop talking about that specifically. Now, the other one would be also Ogre Battle, Ogre Battle, and that whole series. Like, I've loved that series, and like that, the aesthetic and the style and the way the story moves is a huge influence to me, I think. And the character design and stuff. Yeah. It's incredible series. So there's a bunch of things like here and there. I want this game to be a big a big mishmash of all the things I love, of all the games I love. So it's, I mean, besides like you're not going to see like a World War I trooper throwing a grenade and all that stuff. As much as I love Battlefield 1, or like like you won't see like a tie getting chased by an X-wing or anything like that. But I there's lots of different influences. If you've seen the title screen, I'm a fan of Yoshi's Island and like the Mario series because Mario. So you'll see that. There's those are the most obvious like kind of surface things that players will see. But I plan on involving and including subtle things that fans from many different games and many different other things will notice. I'm a Game of Thrones fan personally, so there might be one or two nods here and there of what looks to be a Game of Thrones reference. Ooh. And it may well be. So
great. So I think that's a really good kind of overview of a lot of the systems and mechanics you've got in place, and a lot of the inspiration you took. For people that don't know, you can go try a demo of Kingdom Bash right now. There'll be a link in the details, so if you're interested at all in this game, go give it a shot. Let Matt know what you think. So to bring this to a close, what we always like to ask indie devs is what other indie games or indie dev creations out there are capturing your attention? What are you really looking forward to that people are making?
Okay, so I mean, I got Twitter to follow other indie developers. Like that's my one like decently good push into the real world as far as like trying to find people. I know that Riv Hester, I don't, it might be his real name. He's making a game where there's this character with a big drill. And she like runs around and like goes through the ground and like fights beetles, large beetles and stuff. I don't know. It looks like crazy fun. That's a game that I've been watching. There's another guy, Nathan Ranney, that's making another local multiplayer game. It's a platformer, just like Towerfall. But his animation style is fantastic. He's got a demo out. Kind of jealous because he's got more followers. Yeah, but it looks great. So that's I'm comfortable pitching it. There's so many games. There's a lot of games like recently that like were projects running and they dropped, which kind of stinks. I'm trying to think of other groups to pitch. I mean, if I wanted to say indie, it's hard to call the team behind Shovel Knight indie anymore, considering how many platforms they're on.
That's a fair assessment of things.
They're like indie, kind of like how PUBG is indie. They're like not really anymore.
Indie, but only technically indie.
Totally like in the pockets of all the biggest names in town.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I follow my Twitter because I share people that make cool stuff all the time.
Awesome.
I wish I hadn't. Yeah.
We'll have a link to your Twitter with the interview and all that. So if you are interested in following Matt and seeing the further developments of Kingdom Bash along with all these other cool creations, then don't hesitate. Awesome. Well, Matt Estock, thank you very much for talking to us and for showing off a little bit of the history and the design ideas behind Kingdom Bash.
Thank you.